"He's a monster," screamed a nanny, clutching her bruised arm as the little boy hurled a toy truck at her face. The room fell silent, except for his screams. Every nanny quit. Every therapist gave up but that day. The black cleaner didn't flinch. She just knelt down, looked that child in the eyes and whispered, "You're not a monster. You're just hurting." And that was the moment. Everything changed. The Langston mansion gleamed under the morning sun like a polished crown. Marble floors. Chandeliers that dripped light and silence so heavy it felt rehearsed. Inside, Edward Langston, a self-made millionaire, sat in his glass office, his kingdom of control. His empire stretched across continents. But in the room next door, he had no control at all. His son, Ethan Langston, age 5, small, pale, and with eyes too stormy for his age, screamed until his throat ached. He kicked, bit, clawed, and fought every person who tried to come close. No one could touch him. His mother had passed when he was barely a year old. Since then, Edward filled the house with money, but not warmth. 6 nannies in 6 months, every one of them left crying. Some limping, one with a black eye. The last one stormed out yelling, "That child doesn't need a nanny, he needs an exorcist." But behind her, quietly sweeping the hall, stood Clara Brooks, the cleaner. She said nothing. She just watched that angry little boy, her heart breaking in silence. Clara was invisible in that mansion. She came before dawn, left after dark, earning barely enough to keep her. Lights on in a one-room apartment, she had the soft eyes of a woman who had known pain, a widow who had buried both a husband and a dream. Her hands were rough from years of scrubbing floors, but her voice, gentle, steady, like a lullaby that life could never silence. To the Langstons, she was just the help-but to herself. She was a woman who still believed in love, even when the world didn't believe in her. One morning, as she mopped the long hallway, a loud crash echoed. A nanny ran out crying, "I quit. He threw his cereal at me." Clara looked up. Pan there he was, Ethan red-faced, fists clenched. Shaking in rage, he glared at her from the doorway, eyes wild. She didn't run. She didn't scold. She just knelt down and whispered softly, "You must be tired, huh?" He froze. No one had ever spoken to him like that. Not with anger. Not with fear. Just calm. He grabbed his spoon and threw it. It hit her apron and clattered to the floor. Clara picked it up, smiled, and said, "It's okay, sweetheart. I've dropped worse things than that." The mansion's walls were used to shouting, but that afternoon, they heard something new. Silence, for the first time in weeks. Ethan stopped crying. Clara didn't try to play with him. She didn't bribe or threaten. She just stayed near, quietly humming a hymn as she polished the furniture. Hours passed, and when Edward walked by that evening, he froze. His son, the same boy who bit the last nanny, sat beside the cleaner. Building towers out of sugar cubes, he blinked. What on earth? Clara stood up quickly. "I'm sorry, sir. He wanted to help me clean." Edward's jaw tightened. "He listens to you." She hesitated. "Children don't listen to who yells the loudest, sir. They listen to who listens to them." For the first time in years, Edward had no words. That night, Edward stared out the window of his office. Watching the rain wash the city below, he built empires by logic, control, and power. But none of that mattered to his son. He called the best specialists money could buy. Behavioral experts, psychologists, speech therapists. They all said the same thing. Your son is acting out from trauma. He needs connection, not control. But Edward didn't know how to connect. He only knew how to fix. And yet, the janitor, the woman who barely spoke to him, had done in hours what he couldn't do in years. A week later, Ethan disappeared. Panic spread through the house. Servants searched every room. Guards scoured the gardens. It was Clara who found him outside in the pouring rain, sitting on the steps, sobbing. "Sweetheart," she cried, rushing to him. She wrapped him in her arms, her uniform soaked, her hands trembling. He clung to her, crying, "I thought you left." "Everyone leaves." her heart shattered. She held him close and whispered through the storm, "I'm not everyone. I stand right there in the rain." The boy who kicked and screamed pressed his lips to her cheek. It wasn't just a kiss, it was trust. For the first time in his short life, Ethan let himself be loved. Edward watched from the window. His umbrella dropped to the floor. He had always believed money could fix pain, but he realized that night it couldn't buy the one thing his son needed most, love that doesn't leave. When Clara walked back in, drenched and holding the boy, Edward whispered, "How did you do it?" She set the child down, brushed his hair back, and said quietly, "Love doesn't need money, sir. It just needs patience." Her voice trembled and, "Patience is something your world doesn't pay for." He looked at her, really looked, and for once, he saw not a cleaner, but the woman who'd saved his son's heart. Days later, Edward made a decision that shocked everyone. He called Clara into his office. "Clara," he began, "I want you to stop cleaning." She blinked. "Sir," he smiled faintly, "from now on, you're staying not as staff, but as family. You'll be Ethan's caregiver, teacher, whatever you wish. I owe you more than I can ever pay." Her eyes filled with tears. "Mr. Langston, I don't do this for money." He nodded. "Then let me do it for gratitude, under Clara's care." Ethan grew into a boy who laughed more than he cried. He learned kindness from her, learned that gentleness was not weakness, and love was not fear. Edward became a different man. 2. He started coming home early, leaving business dinners unfinished, choosing bedtime stories over boardrooms, and every night, as Clara tucked Ethan in, the boy would whisper, "I love you, Mama Clara." She'd smile, her heart full, her eyes wet. "I love you too, my boy." Years later, Edward Langston's company launched a new foundation, the Clara Fund for Children's Healing. It's providing emotional and mental health support for kids who lost a parent at the launch. Reporters asked Edward what inspired this change. He looked toward the stage, where Clara stood with Ethan, now a teenager, smiling beside him with a voice full of emotion. He said, "I used to believe money made you powerful, but this woman taught me love makes you human." The crowd rose and applauded in the middle of it all. Clara simply smiled, the quiet woman who once mopped floors, now standing as the reason a broken family was whole again. That night, Clara stood outside under the stars, the sound of laughter echoing from the house behind her. She closed her eyes, whispering a prayer of thanks, not for the money, not for the recognition, but because she had done what she was born to do, to love where others couldn't. Clara's story reminds us that real healing doesn't come from wealth or status. It comes from presence, patience, and kindness. She didn't have power. She didn't have privilege, but she had something greater, compassion that never gave up. Because love, true love, doesn't care what's in your wallet. It only cares what's in your heart. Asterisk. Comment below. Have you ever seen love or patience change someone's heart? Subscribe for more cinematic stories about redemption, compassion, and the quiet heroes who remind us what it means to be human.